All right, let's talk a little bit about the native Ozarks. Now, we're not going to spend a lot of time on this, especially the prehistoric stuff. In your history classes and anthropology classes and things like that, what's the dividing line between prehistoric and historic? How do we decide if something is prehistoric or it's historic? Right, that's the measurement that we use. If we get beyond the age of a written record. So when you're talking about the Ozarks, you don't have to go very far back. You're not in Fred Flintstone days talking about prehistoric. You're talking about just a few hundred years ago when you get into the prehistoric era. So anything before we have a written record, a written observation of an area is prehistoric. After is historic. So in the prehistoric era, we know from studies by archaeologists that the Paleo Indians, as they were called, the earliest humans to come into this area, came at least 10,000 years ago into the Ozarks, and probably earlier than that to the fringes of the region, to the river valleys and stuff like that on the edges of the region. We doubt that they had discussions and debates over whether or not they were in the Ozarks when they were here. That, it's all part of that social construct thing. They didn't see a sign that said "Welcome to the Ozarks" when they showed up. We did all that later. A lot of attention to the prehistoric residents of the Ozarks has been paid to the so-called bluff dwellers who lived in caves and outcroppings along the rivers and streams in the Ozarks, especially the White River Valley, and the artifacts, the evidence that they left behind of their lives. You can see there from roughly 100 AD to about 1500 AD, the bluff dwellers. The bluff dwellers had diets that would be similar to some diets in the historic Ozarks, in the white settler diets of the 19th century. Their diets, we know from excavations, were heavy on deer. And I'm not sure about you, but when I was a kid growing up in rural Arkansas, my diet was pretty heavy on venison at certain times of the year. And bison, I didn't eat much buffalo, but of course bison were in the area at that time. Elk were in the Ozarks back in those days. But apparently deer was a favorite. Probably easier to bring down deer than a big buffalo or an elk. And certainly the sorts of crops grown that you would find across Native America, corn, beans, squash, those kinds of things that were indigenous to America, that were then introduced in the Columbian Exchange back to Europeans. And you would have found those kinds of things here in the Ozarks growing just like you would have down in Mexico or other places in the Americas.